Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to our panelists for joining us from their homes. Even though everybody's working at home, this is an extremely busy time for this business, and we greatly appreciate you taking time out to be with us. And do a quick introductions, and then we'll start talking. Our panelists today, Jeff Grossman, Executive Vice President of Content Strategy and Operations for CBS All Access and CBS Entertainment Digital. Keith Lagoy, President of Networks and Distribution for Sony Pictures Television. Alison Hoffman, President of Domestic Networks for Starz. And Tiran Dagan, Chief Digital Officer of Communications, Media, and Technology Business for Cognizant. Thank you again all for joining us. Let's start with some news. The general area that we're talking about is streaming and the growth of direct-to-consumer business models for traditional Hollywood players. And this is a fast-moving, fast-growing business, so much so that we had some fresh headlines just this morning on Thursday, May 7th, about CBS All Access. Viacom had earnings today and talked, of course, direct-to-consumer was such a big focus of the Wall Street analysts on the earnings call. And Bob Bakish mentioned that you're going to see a user interface refresh this summer and a bigger rebranding and what he even described as a relaunch down the road. Can you give us any insights, Jeff?
Sure, Cynthia, and thanks for having me. CBS All Access already has one of the largest TV libraries among the SVOD services. And so we've been looking at for some time how to expand that library with all the tremendous content from the Viacom cable brands, including Nickelodeon, Comedy Central, MTV, VH1, and BET, and Smithsonian. And so we're going to start to accelerate and operationalize bringing some of that content into the service. And that's, I believe, what Bob referenced this morning. That'll accompany some sort of changes in our interface to make sure that content is easily accessible. And then over the course of a slightly longer run, we're looking at how we sort of connect all of the amazing pieces of content that we have inside of the Viacom CBS family through our SVOD service. And I think that's probably the broader kind of relaunch or positioning strategy you alluded to.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, again, it's just a sign of the incredible momentum in this general area, and a sign that that big companies with big content assets are really looking at their libraries, looking at the vaults in very different ways from even 2 and 3 years ago in terms of what is possible, what kind of business model shifts that companies, big companies like Warner Media, like Sony Pictures, Lionsgate, Starz are looking at in terms of how do we slice and dice, repackage assets for a new marketplace, and even a new generation of consumers that are just watching TV in different ways, as we've talked about. I open this up to anybody in the panel. What would you say at this moment in time, the last 12 to 24 months have been so much activity in this space? What would you say is the most sort of the most groundbreaking aspect of moving to what would you say is the most groundbreaking aspect for you in terms of how you had previously done your jobs for the move to increasingly supporting direct-to-consumer streaming platforms?
I mean, I think for us at Sony, we have a couple of different approaches actually to this, because on the one hand, we have a couple of very strong direct-to-consumer brands in Funimation, which is our global anime service. And then in India, we have a digital service called Sony Live, which is part of our big Sony Entertainment Television Networks portfolio there, which is the most sort of powerful set of networks in India. And I think, we've obviously spent a long time thinking about this, and as part of broader Sony, partnering with PlayStation and looking at how they've built their platform to 100 million global, subscribers. And obviously it makes you think a lot about consumers, and it makes you think a lot about what really motivates them to come to your service, to engage with your service, to stick with your service, to be delighted by your service. On the other hand, we're also, for our sort of main movie and television production business, we've decided that we like the path of independence. So where in specific communities of interest where we really think we can be strong and powerful and engaged consumers, we've created our own consumer services. But in areas such as the more general entertainment part of our business, such as movies and television shows, we've decided that what we want to be able to do is to partner with all of the streaming services as they come on, and that there's been a huge demand for our content, for our movies, for our television shows, for our library, because of the great appetite for content that these streaming services have. And so that's, I think, been the other real fascinating thing, is the hunger that audiences around the world have for great storytelling. Probably exacerbated over the last couple of months, but definitely demonstrable over the past 2, 3, 5 years, is that when you are able to bring great, compelling stories to people in a way which is how they want to consume those stories, how they want, when they want, in the manner of their choosing, on the device of their choosing, that is something that is incredibly compelling. And for us as storytellers to be able to bring a wide range of stories with a wide range of partners to a wide range of audiences, that's been a tremendous opportunity.
Jeff, can you talk a little bit more? You've been in the process of bringing, two big companies coming together to create an even bigger company, and obviously
right.
there's a lot already afoot in that score for CBS All Access.
Yeah, one of the things that we're particularly focused on is kind of a mix of our content types. And All Access has been around for over 5 years now, but one of the key differentiators for us is that the service includes the live linear feed of CBS broadcast. So we have live and major broadcast event programming, along with a really robust VOD library, past seasons of current shows on CBS, and then our CBS originals, like the ones that we've put out around the Star Trek franchise, Picard and Discovery. And so we feel like that mix is really dynamic, and getting a handle on how we leverage some of our major live events, whether they're sports or events like the Grammys that bring quite a few people into the service on connected devices and across digital platforms. And how that provides a great opportunity for us to introduce those viewers and subscribers to some of the other content that they may not realize or know well inside of our service. So that's been one of the opportunities and focal points for us. And I think that opportunity will get even richer as we bring in more content from across the sort of Viacom CBS portfolio.
Yeah, I want to talk about certainly the value of library. Certainly there's so much attention to original content, but also the value of library is clearly something that a lot of the bigger plays that are coming out are really banking, that people will come for the hip new show, but stay to watch hours and hours of movies and TV shows. But before we talk a little more about library, Tiran, you cover, for Cognizant, you look at this and consumer behavior and connectivity on a very macro level. What are you seeing? Not so much this immediate moment with COVID, but before that, what were you seeing in terms of consumer awareness and connectivity needs for allowing all of this great programming to stream on our phones and into our homes?
Yeah, I have a different perspective than my colleagues who are at the helm of creating great content. We get involved into the nuts and bolts of making this content reach audiences. Last year's Variety Panel Summit, all the talk was about the value of data and analytics, which DTC puts in your hand. That is one of the mega trends that we're seeing. It's not so much from the consumer perspective as much as it is from the content provider, making sure that you're not only gathering and analyzing, but you're using that data you're collecting as an insight to better understand how is the content performing, and if it's acquired content, then what should be the price that I will pay based on the popularity, the kind of analytics that Netflix became very adept to. And we're at the same time we have an annual study where we look at generational trends, and clearly the up and coming generations, and Gen Z, for instance, have a much different consumption pattern and propensity to be able to absorb advertising and the patience for quick response. So one of the bigger trends that we're seeing is how all of this comes together, how the data drives and informs decision making for every aspect, from the consumer experience, personalization and targeting of a content, as well as targeting the right ads in front of the right person at the right time in the right context. And that is where a lot of our customers, as they launch or start to stabilize the services that they rushed to get out, are looking to really bolden.
Just to comment on that, I totally agree. We're an extremely data-driven company. The real-time viewer consumption data that you get from a direct-to-consumer service is unparalleled. That's what really enables you to service that viewer, understand sort of those viewing patterns, what they're interested in, what you can serve them next, that is really going to, create stickiness with the service. So couldn't agree more. And then also, marketing is my background. What it also provides is avenues to reach out to new customers. So if I understand content affinities within my product, I can also understand how to spin up campaigns that are going to put those content pieces together and bring in new customers. So yes, totally on the same page.
Oh, I definitely want to talk about the data. Let me ask you, Tiran, though, just in general, we hear a lot in the marketplace about there seems to be a consensus emerging that there will be maybe 4 to 6, I've heard it 3 to 5, 4 to 6 different ways, but that there will be somewhere, in the mid single digits of big services that people will pay for. Does your research show that, or do you feel, because I have heard some skepticism of that, saying that it's actually, we don't know quite what the shape of the market looks like, but that there will be opportunity for smaller players. What do you think from where you sit right now?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. A lot of this is market forces that will have to play out, because it's a balance between pricing and a desire to reach content and the efforts to create an experience that's unique to me. And the more sophisticated that we can get to understand the personas of the folks who are attracted to our content, and if you're cult-based content creator versus live stream programming, then you're going to be targeting a different slice of the audience. There's going to be room for the audiences to be sliced and diced in different ways. We're not anticipating any particular number for it to be reduced to, because it's more a matter of the supply, demand, and desires of the audience, and how it's being addressed and at what cost. Because at some point, people will look to add up how much are they paying now compared to my $200 cable bill, and am I spending more or less? But there's a lot of room to play in that span.
And I think that's what we found with our Funimation service, for example, which isn't trying to compete with Starz or CBS All Access or Netflix or Amazon for that big broad audience that those services are obviously going for, but that really targets a very fervent fan base of people who are lovers of anime and who demonstrate their love of anime in all sorts of ways: the way they dress up to movie events, the way they go to conventions, the way they, really lean into all aspects of that. And we aim to super serve that fan base. Do we need would we like 150 million subscribers globally? Sure. But do we expect and do we need that? No, we don't. What we do look to forge is a very deep connection with that community of interest, with that anime superfan. That said, I think the data thing is very interesting. We at Sony have access to a lot of data through PlayStation, through our movies, through Movies Anywhere, through and so that gives us a lot of different points of entry to both help us create stories, but to then help us try and find the right partners to tell those stories with. So, on this panel, we make SWAT for CBS, we make Outlander for Starz, And that, that gives us a good sort of variety in terms of understanding how different partners and different audiences interact with the stories that we tell, and how we can therefore do a better job of both telling those stories and finding the right people to partner with. And that we think is one of the, the fortunate places we do occupy as an independent, is to be able to work with a variety of different partners and to then provide the best content opportunity and the best partnership opportunity in each occasion.
If I can add, but one thing on top of that, in addition to the fact that a content provider may have a bigger common theme of what they're going after for the audience, there are sub-segments within that content, especially when you have a big catalog, such as many of you have. And the thing that seems to be working really well is connecting that data and insight about the audience to changing the way that people experience that content. So the slate that I get and the slate that you will get will be different, because the emotive connection that you just mentioned, there's a different trigger, but both of us might like the same content movie, but the way that you understand me and expose that content to me can get both of us engaged by using different triggers.
Let's talk about, just to kind of give a sense of the stakes of what's, what is available and how quickly this market is growing in a short time. We're going to pull up a slide here. We have some fascinating research from our Variety Intelligent Platform service, which has a newly launched data and analytics service through Variety. And this particular bit of research will be available to everybody who is registered for the Executive Leadership Summit. And it's got a lot of info. It kind of gives you like a timeline of the big SVOD services. It's just astounding to see that global SVOD revenue in 2018 was 36 billion, projected in just 6 years' time to grow to 87 billion. That is obviously that's a projection, but that is a pretty intense growth rate. And I think we all know enough to know that this isn't going to be 87 billion in new money. That there's going to be some new money coming into the system, but some of it is going to be, consumers reallocating things, traditional entertainment spending that they now do to streaming. And certainly the conditions that we've all been living in, most of us around the world have been living in for the past 6 or 7 weeks, would seem to be, this would seem to be, just such a coincidental but maybe fortuitous confluence of events as the TV business is really taking off and the world has changed, hopefully temporarily, but it has changed. Is there anything for any of you? Is there anything that you're seeing in the marketplace now, the consumer behavior, consumption, signups, that it will make you either change the way you're approaching your streaming platforms or accelerate any of your investment or rollouts? Anything that you're seeing at this extraordinary time?
One thing that we're noticing, and it goes back to something you said earlier, Cynthia, which is we're seeing increased subscriber acquisition, increased viewership, increased engagement, meaning views per customer. I think like a lot of streamers are. The value of library at a time like this, I think, can't be understated. People are plowing through content at record pace right now because they have available time. And so I think the better your library, the more diverse your library, and the deeper your library, the more satisfied your customers are and the stickier they are right now. So I think I don't think we're necessarily observing different consumption, but just overall more and going deeper into our library, seeing things pop. We have Outlander on, we have Vita on right now, Power, we have all these great shows that are very recent shows, but we saw a show called Black Sails pop in recent weeks, which is an older title. It's an older original series, which was a wonderful series, but it's been off the air for a number of years now, but we see that making the top 10. So anyway, that's sort of what we're seeing on our end.
And I mean, when you see those kinds of things, that must be music to your ears, because, who could have predicted that Black Sails? Keith or Jeff, have you seen any similar kind of like pops for things that surprised you?
Yeah, I mean, I think to the point that was made, I think we're seeing an enormous sign-up levels for Funimation and Sony just through the roof. I mean, it was going well before we were in lockdown, and obviously that's just accelerated since then. But the other thing is, massive demand for our library, for the reasons that were mentioned, which is, people are at home. And people are looking to be entertained and to be distracted and to laugh and to feel and to have anything that takes them away from the sort of scary reality that we're all facing. And that is our job, all of us as storytellers and entertainers, to give that relief and that distraction. And people are, as you said, plowing through content at extraordinary rates, rediscovering classic shows that also maybe take them to a happier, more nostalgic time in their lives when the world seemed like a simpler, funner place. But a show like Community, for example, which is a great show that's always had a very strong fan base, seems to be exploding. I mean, I think you mentioned Outlander. We've had a lot of shows that and some of them, frankly, were maybe a little marginal, but now have found an audience. And I think the opportunity for all of us here, traditional broadcasters, new streaming platforms, is for the first time in a long time, we have the opportunity to re-engage audiences with our products and with our content. And this is an opportunity that I think everybody is leaning in very hard to say, well, how do I do that? How do I build a new viewing habit so that when we come out of this, and we will, that we can come out of it stronger and more connected to our audiences than ever before, and have a really firm foundation that we can continue to build off of. And I think that is a tremendous opportunity that everybody is really leaning into.
Mm-hmm. Jeff, Bob on the call today was really talking about incredible free trial to conversion ratios for CBS All Access and for the Showtime app. I'm guessing that this couldn't be a better time for you to be accessing, 100 Paramount Pictures movie titles, which, we reported was going on your service. Like, this has to be music to your ears.
It is, and to echo what Keith and Alison are saying, March and April have been record months in terms of total streams inside of the service. We're seeing live TV consumption up 40+%. A lot of that's driven by our news content and our live linear news content. And then I think some of our, programming has really resonated with audiences. First and foremost, Star Trek Picard, which was an original on the All Access service. I think there's something, in addition to a lot of the classic and nostalgia library programming, shows like Cheers that we have, and a great complement of Paramount movies. I think there's something in the Star Trek DNA that is embedded with sort of a hopeful kind of look at the future. And that type of content is also really resonating with fans and viewers right now.
I mean, it's just such a sampling opportunity when I think of, the old school television process of, promos and Friends to get people to the 8:30 show. I mean, this is like that writ large at a time when people have literally never had more content at their fingertips. Let me ask you about age ranges of usage. That, I think the conventional wisdom is that streaming tends to attract a younger demographic, but are you guys, anybody seeing anything that kind of defies that, or are you seeing as streaming grows up, you're getting a wider complement of ages and demographics?
I think we're seeing, again, Funimation is a very targeted service, but in the conversations that we have as independent content providers to all of the streaming services, there was a time in the past when there was a much more targeted set of shows that those services were looking for. Breaking Bad was that classic, Netflix, AMC, that then became a show that also helped to really grow Netflix's business. But now what we're seeing is that the range of conversations about the range of shows, and I'm sure the same is true for Alison and for Jeff, for their services, is a much broader range. And I think that's reflecting the fact that, you know, the audiences that are signing up to these services, that are being targeted by these services, are much broader. And therefore that the range of content that you're looking to offer them in order to attract them and keep them on those services is necessarily going to be broader as well. And that's certainly something that we're seeing across both our current content, movies, television shows. Also unscripted content is, you know, one of these things that's now becoming definitely a new area of interest. We have shows like Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy that, you know, we're talking to streaming services about and licensing to streaming services, because those are appealing now to audience segments that they are trying to target and convert as subscribers and keep and retain on their services. So definitely from that independent partner perspective, we're seeing a lot more variety and range in terms of the conversations we're having.
For us, women are driving the success of Starz across the board. In terms of streaming, the audience is even more female and younger. Yes, we do see that the younger audiences are driving OTT and then particularly direct to consumer.
Yeah, we're seeing something similar. We're considerably younger on All Access than broadcast. But to Keith's point, I think now that you see sort of really the saturation of connected devices and over-the-top devices that enable over-the-top viewing, the diversity of the audience is tremendous. And so we have a really diverse content base, and as a result, we see fairly diverse demos across different programming verticals.
Tiran, is there anything interesting that you're seeing in research in terms of demographics that are starting to embrace on-demand streaming? You know, anything that you see in your research?
Our view is a much more global view, so we're looking at the trends in Gen Z consumption overall of content. Not anything particular to this, you know, to the growth in content consumption right now.
It's interesting too, because my orientation is always so traditional TV. I mean, obviously you care about the age range of your subscribers, but in a subscription platform, you're not so laser focused on that 18 to 49 or 18 to 34. That must be very freeing for those of you that have come up through the old school.
Yeah, I was formerly at AMC, so I was at a basic, you know, ad-supported network, and going to premium. That's right. I mean, all ages, all audiences are great audiences because you're not trying to sell a demo.
Yeah, we have actually an ad-supported version of CBS All Access in addition to a ad-free version, and so we do actually pay pretty close attention to demo. It's been a really positive story for us. I think we're roughly 2/3 of our audience is in that 18 to 49 demo range, but it also is freeing to some level to be able to, you know, sort of cater to specific audiences within the various demographics.
Are you able to see, given that you're so, you know, CBS and All Access are so closely intertwined, are you able to see a result if a show that, a library show or a current show that is available, a current CBS network show that is available for streaming on All Access, do you see, if you see older episodes start to get a pop, can you see a commensurate gain in the first run episodes on the network? Do you track that kind of stuff?
We do look pretty closely at the relationship between the performance of the content across seasons in our service and how it's doing on linear, definitely. I'm not sure we're at a place where we have that sort of direct correlation, but I do think we can, you know, sort of generalize and say that when we see things performing well for us, they tend to be performing well on linear and vice versa. So there really is a symbiotic relationship between the two.
We found that, and Alison, you probably were there at the time, with Breaking Bad. I mean, Breaking Bad, you know, AMC was one of the bravest networks, I think, to take that on, to believe in it, to launch it, to stick with it. And I think what happened when Netflix came along and we then licensed the show to Netflix, an audience discovered it on Netflix that then came back to, the seasons on AMC, and really it became a very positive flywheel where one reinforced the other, and it became, in the last 2 or 3 seasons of Breaking Bad on AMC were massive. And partly, the show really found its feet, and Brian and Aaron Paul, the show was winning Emmys and getting all sorts of acclaim and really becoming in the zeitgeist. But it had also found an audience that maybe it wouldn't have had the opportunity to find to the same degree, had there not been that streaming audience that then came to it, but then went to find it on linear. And definitely those ones where the combination of those things made it a much, it's definitely 1 + 1 ended up equaling a lot more than 2.
I think that was, Breaking Bad is such a good example. I think that was such a wake-up call for the industry, because as people started to put it together, oh wow, this has been on Netflix, and a wake-up call, and in some ways a little, for traditional cable broadcast, almost a little painful that it took exposure on Netflix to bring more people to the linear channel. But I think that the bigger thing was just realizing that making it available, that one click, I can watch an episode and then I can watch another one. It, again, such a mind shift in mindset for so many people in the industry, that I think is still, as people weigh, upside and back end and different kinds of business models for producing content. But that period of, like, if I'm not mistaken, 2014, 2015 was really eye-opening for people.
Well, that said, I know Alison can speak to this better than I can. I mean, we certainly felt the anticipation for those last episodes in the last season or 2 seasons, for the weekly episode, as it hit AMC, was extraordinary. And I mean, and so despite the absolute convenience of being able to binge and watch and catch up, there was also that sense of massive anticipation for that weekly, fix and the weekly unveiling of how this thing was going to end. That actually was just showed the power of both sides of the equation: the power of a linear network and the anticipation that can provide, but also the power of a streaming service and the convenience and the opportunity to binge that can give.
Let me ask the kind of a contrarian question: how much is too much? How much is too much content to put up and available on a Starz play or a CBS All Access or a Funimation? I mean, I got to believe that on some level you don't want to put everything you got all the time. You want to mix. You want to hold some things back and bring things on at different periods, or do you feel like just here's the menu, here's the a la carte, eat as much as you want?
I think we believe that a deep library is very valuable. Sorry, I'm getting some background noise here. A deep library is really valuable and is going to be a key to success. But yes, content curation and how you serve up that content, whether that's via a recommendation engine or whether that's editorially, you're sort of, just surfacing things that seem timely, that seem relevant for the customer. We spend a lot of time thinking about discoverability of the content. In general, I think for customers, more is more. I want more content. I want more to discover and explore. But there is that sort of piece of being overwhelmed and the sort of paralysis that can happen when you're faced with too much choice. And so I think that's the job from a product perspective of the networks, is sort of, how do I help surface the things that I think are going to be really great and relevant and valuable for you, but also let you know about everything that exists in case what I'm serving isn't really your cup of tea. And we work on that every day.
That is the new art and science. Jeff, you must have people with so much now and a growing amount of content. You must have people really focused on the curation, and as Alison said, the when you serve it up and to who. It's a whole different discipline that.
We do, and we spent quite a lot of time thinking about it. So I do think that it's a little bit art and science. There's a recommendation engine and a machine learning component that's critical. so that we can really personalize what we might recommend to you based on your viewing history or other signals that we're seeing based on your activity, in the service. But I do think, and I agree with Alison, that having that really, deep and broad base of library available at any given time is also important. And we're basically, just adopting a really viewer and consumer-centric approach, where we're allowing them to sort of choose the path and the frequency with which they're watching the programming, but really carefully thinking about their preferences and making sure that we're highlighting programming based on those preferences.
The perspective that we see when you think about the legacy windowing strategies that went out the door with the emergence of DTC, it requires a completely new windowing strategy, right? Having that deep catalog, but now windowing is not so much about release, but it's about the surfacing of content to the right person at the right time. And I guess I'm going to get tagged as the one-trick pony. It's all about the data. It's about truly understanding. We have several agencies who are filled with ethnographic researchers and anthropologists, and we look at the fundamentals of what drives human behavior. And it takes that level of understanding as you're designing your service to really understand what makes this particular audience segment or this individual tick. What is that next content that I will surface them, so that overall, we've all been in a situation where we binged mindlessly. We just clicked on to the next thing. Sometimes the state of mind that you are in at the moment really, really matters. You can't even tag a person by a particular label. This is, action-loving, fun-filled, etc. So understanding the context, understanding what's driving the human behavior, and continuously tailoring the experience is where you create a competitive advantage over any other, catalog exposing content recommendation engine. And one last thing, with a comment. I love one of the things that we're seeing. We're a technology company, and a lot of companies ask us, how do we apply AI into the recommendation engine? It's the balance of where do you let the AI control and how much do you leave for curation, so that there is a feeling someone is managing my experience, especially when you have multiple brands in one broader player experience.
I think that's true. I think we're all, a lot of us, saying the same thing, which is the data is vital to have and to understand and to use. At the same time, there is really no substitute also for the human touch. I don't think a machine would have invented Breaking Bad, and yet it became this culturally significant, moment. And I think that is the beauty of this business, and I think that's what drives all of us. Is it's the unexpected. It's the thing that you didn't necessarily foresee that suddenly becomes, this giant hit and this thing that defines the culture. And I think that's what we're all in this for, because that is an exciting thing to be able to do, and that's what motivates us, and it's what drives our audiences, and it's what is the beauty of this business.
Absolutely. Alison?
Yeah, I was just going to say an anecdote that maybe supports what you're talking about. When everything started to lock down, and we were looking at the product, we said, okay, I think we should really surface feel-good content. This is a scary time, but let's do that. Let's put together kind of collections that make you feel good. And so we surfaced that, and that started trending because we pushed it. And then without surfacing it, what also started trending was apocalyptic, terrifying content on its own. And us sitting in a room, we said, gosh, that's the last thing I want to see. But that's not what not all consumers felt that way. You saw spikes and things like searching for a friend at the end of the world and things like that. So I think it speaks to that, you can try to program and curate, and you can be right, and you can also be wrong. And there can be other things that just take over based on sort of what you're seeing from your audience.
Yeah, I mean, talking about the confluence of circumstances, people at home watching more and more content, and people such as yourselves having enormous ability to track exactly what they're watching, how many minutes. It must be it must be energizing even at this time. Let me wrap. I would love to just kind of go around the horn here and say, in this world of so much data coming in, give me an example of a data point that you can only get from digital that is so instructive to your business. Start with you, Keith.
I mean, there are so many. I think a lot of it is you're really trying to understand engagement, and you're trying to understand how people feel, the passion and the engagement that people feel for content is, fandom for our Funimation service, but also, fandom for our movies. I mean, you look at a movie like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, that is a movie that is beloved and beloved and beloved, and I think is being, and someone like Quentin Tarantino as a filmmaker has a level of passion and engagement that data can indicate but can't ever totally capture. And I think so we've got to be really looking for those moments of passion, engagement, and fandom, because that, in the end of the day, is the thing that moves the culture. And I think that the things that work are things that influence and impact the culture. And that's what we're in the business of trying to do, is to tell those stories that do that.
Mm-hmm. Alison?
Yeah, I think it's hard to pick one. I think maybe I'll pick consumption data, and I'll say episodic decay on the series side. Are people getting through that entire season, or are they falling off at a particular point? And the speed with which they're watching. Once that season is up, are they flying through those episodes, or is it taking a while? I think that's really interesting to look at for us.
Yeah, I bet. Tiran?
It's so hard to pick one, but without harping again on data, I think a good understanding of what is behind the scenes. There's been such a rush to launch services and cobble things together, and there's probably going to be more breathing room now that the services that are out there. What have we done that is a little more rushed, and how do we strengthen our service? Whether it's resiliency for fluctuations in demand, it's really taking a look at all of the components. We have the DTC framework. It's kind of the components or capabilities that you need to have mature in a service. And I think being able to take a step back and look at all of those components, those capabilities, and ask, which of these have we rushed too much to the market, and what do we need to mature in order for us to get to the next level of service? Those deep insights, personalization, internationalization, rights and royalty management, a lot of the components that get rushed when you're trying to expose your catalog to your audience.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Jeff, take us home.
Yeah, so a lot of great notes here already. I spend a lot of time thinking about our content mix and how to best present it to viewers. And so one of the great things about having a data-driven platform and approach to things generally is we can see what else people are watching and make connections between certain types of programming, whether it's daytime or unscripted, and live events and other types that we have in the service. And being able to sort of understand that on a very granular level, and then think about it in terms of building out real pockets of value for subscribers is something we're uber focused on, and it's truly a benefit of having that subscriber level data.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, my goodness, thank you all so much for spending time with us, for sharing your insights. It's been enjoyable. I so appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks also to our viewers, and hope we can meet again under more traditional conditions, IRL, as they say. Thank you.